Hello everyone and welcome back to the Great Book of Grudges. My name is Nathan and we're here with the second embargo drop for Total War Warhammer 3. There's a lot to showcase today, but I wanted to start off with Skarbrand, his mechanics and his gameplay, as a lot of people have been curious about Khorne and how he and his faction are going to survive throughout a world that many have range and he doesn't. And I can say that he can survive quite a bit. With all that being said, everything that you're seeing here is of course early access, so there are stuff that could be subject to change and all that type of stuff, just letting you guys know. So don't take everything as gospel, and the most important thing, anything that does have a spoiler will of course be tagged as a spoiler in the YouTube chapter section below, so you can avoid anything in case you don't want to see any story elements and so on. With all that being said, let's not waste any more time and jump right in. As there are some issues with cinematics at the moment and some flyover stuff, anything that has to do with that will be left at the end, so either way it still keeps the spoiler away. So here we are with Skarbrand, starting in the Northern Chaos Wastes with a 7-stack. A lot of Bloodletters as you can see, and some Chaos Warhounds because everyone likes Warhounds. The army itself might seem small, but keep in mind that the demons themselves follow Skarbrand as he rips and tears. They kinda just take the pickings after. Now, other than that, your location is in the Northern Chaos Wastes, as I've said. You're quite far off from, say, Cathay or Kislev, closer to Kislev, mind you, but you have a lot of enemies around. Skarbrand obviously does not like making friends, and there's a few different factions that you already start at war with. Not only that, but Nikari's quite close too, and we're gonna have to deal with him soon. But first we can talk about the usual. The first is his faction effects known as Wrathful Reaper. Armies replenish in foreign territory, which is useful for a faction which is going to be doing a lot of melee damage. Diplomatic relations -20 with Khornate factions. Yep, even other demons from the same deity will dislike you. And finally, campaign movement range plus 25% after raising a settlement for all characters. This will keep you going and keeping doing as much damage as possible. Skarbrand's own unique trait is known as the Exiled One, which has the following benefits. Campaign movement range plus 35% after winning a battle. You're going to be moving a lot with him. And finally, recruitment cost minus 35% when an enemy or raised territory. This means that you'll still be able to get an army even whilst constantly on the move. Stat-wise, you can see that Skarbrand is fairly powerful, and he is a melee powerhouse. This is no joke. Like his lore counterpart, he is built to do damage, and he's able to rip apart even other greater demons without too much of an issue. Skarbrand will obviously have his own unique skills, two of which are the same that we're already used to, the bottom being focusing on your administrative stuff, which in all fairness focuses more on Khornate stuff, because you don't want public order bonuses or growth bonuses, you want casualty replenishment and being able to spread more corruption. The line just above focuses on pretty much the usual, focusing on boosting up the capabilities of your troops, sometimes by melee attack power, melee defense, and so on, but the line just above, that which is normally focused on a lot of different varieties when it comes to boosting up the same character, this is mostly focused on weapon strength and melee attack. Well, you know, this is Skarbrand, he's a Khornate demon, so rather than boosting up his melee defense, he needs to maim, kill, destroy, slaughter, and the like, and it makes a lot of sense here. Obviously, Skarbrand will also have access to his own unique skill line, which will further make him a bigger melee powerhouse, that's the best way to explain it, with one specific skill giving him Vanguard, and yeah, that's as terrifying as it sounds. I have not only just used him, but played against him with Vanguard, and yeah, he can do a lot of damage, he can get up to your face, you don't want that to happen. Also, you're able to get regeneration whilst in melee combat, and once again, that is very useful. You can start unlocking these skills at rank 11, and that won't take long at all. Trust me, you'll start seeing in the video that even before a certain point, I'll be very close to max level. Construction for Chaos factions, as you notice, will be a little different. You have two different provincial capitals. So let's talk about them. So the first one is a dimensional gate of sorts, while the other is a fortress. Both of them have different effects, where, for example, the fortress has better growth, and that's quite useful, especially as a Khornate faction, because, yeah, trust me. Though, the gateway is also quite useful too, so it very much falls on your specific playstyle. I myself have been favouring the growth buildings, as I have found that Khorne is slow with growth, especially when you start looking at the optimal way on how to start taking over settlements. But the rest of the stuff, say for example the basic military, advanced military, defense, and landmarks, that all stays the same. You can see that the Khornate faction is split through a different amount of buildings. Basic military buildings stay at rank 3, which means that you can use that and split it into all your minor settlements too. So you won't have to feel as you are getting stuck in one specific area with just your provincial capital having all your military buildings and nothing else. This was obviously a bigger problem when it came to Warhammer 1 and Warhammer 2, so it's good to see that this is disappearing now. The infrastructure buildings are quite varied, mostly focusing around stuff that you will need as a Kkhornate faction. Better leadership, casualty replenishment and the like, even spreading some Kkhornate corruption, but what you will notice is that for once there is no growth building. Growth works very, very differently when it comes to Khorne. Your main source of growth is actually through your battles, and we'll get to that in just a second, which is why I said earlier that the growth provincial building is probably going to help you out quite a bit. And now we get to look at the technology tree, and as you can see, it's quite large because, well, this is Khorne. His sacred number is 8, so there needs to be 8 separate branches. You don't have to complete the full branch to move on to the next. You only have to research 3 different technologies and then move on to the next one if you want to. It's all dependent on your playstyle and which ones are the best for you. Now you'll notice the difference already, as none of your tech costs money, but does cost time and your newest resource, skulls. This is a very valuable resource, but we'll talk about that in just a second. Right now I'm just going to let it play through so you can see all the different techs and what bonuses they have. Now that we looked at the tech tree and you can see that we're going to need a lot of skulls, let's talk about skulls themselves. This is a new currency only available to Khornate factions, surprise surprise. The Blood God demands skulls and we're here and happily to supply them to him. And as you can see here, you can get them through a variety of different means, whilst also spending them on a variety of different means. The most common way will mostly be fighting, especially as Skarbrand wants to do a lot of fighting, and there are over 100 different minor factions throughout the Warhammer 3 map, so why not pick up your axes and get in there for a fight? You can use skulls to pay tribute to Khorne and he will provide you with some favour. As you can see here, 2000 will get you a 10-turn buff, which will increase your movement range after raising settlements, income increase from post-battle, being able to summon bloodletters, and finally being able to get extra units for your blood hosts. 2000 is a lot of skulls at the very beginning. Later on in the campaign you'll start to have more, but what I've noticed is I use this around turn 30 more or less. As at the beginning of your campaign, skulls are going to be quite rare to get your hands on. Like the other Monogod Chaos factions, you'll have access to Unholy Manifestations. With this, you'll be able to summon an army to attack you directly. This is used to not only get skulls, but you can use it to then get some extra movement and get closer to an enemy. You can also increase your campaign movement range, or maybe get more skulls from battle for a certain amount of turns. And finally, of course, raising an enemy settlement with one go. It's fairly expensive, but imagine doing that to a high tier settlement belonging to, say for example, Karl Franz in Altdorf. Anything that might be too much of a trouble for you and you just don't want to deal with it, you might as well just blow it up. Bloodletting is a new mechanic available to the Khornate factions, and all of your different armies will have access to their own bloodletting. This, in essence, is very similar to that of Greenskin Fightiness, however, you get more and more benefits as you go on. I'm just going to go for the final benefits here. Upkeep minus 20%, growth plus 70% for all provinces, casualty replenishment plus 4% for all armies, corn corruption plus 6 local province, and finally global recruitment duration minus 2 turns for the minimum of 1. Now, as you can see, this is already quite powerful with a minus 20 upkeep. This means that you'll have to keep on fighting to be able to achieve this, as it will go down. But it's the growth one that is the strongest, as if you have a number of different armies reaching to this point, your growth will rapidly be accelerated throughout all your different provinces, and you'll be able to get to the final tier in no time. But we're talking a lot about administration stuff. How about we start talking about some blood, some guts, some glory? Well, no blood, because we're gonna have to wait for that, because that's always a DLC. But other than that, we can talk about guts and glory, can't we? When you win a battle, you'll naturally get experience, you'll get some treasury, but you'll also get some skulls. However, when you get your little options down there, that is once again focusing around, do you want to get some skulls, do you want some replenishment, or do you want some cash? Skulls will generally be the thing that you're going for, but replenishment also works considering that you're going to be a very, very fighty army, you're going to be a very fighty faction, you're going to want to be able to replenish your troops. As Skarbrand regains a lot of movement after winning a battle, we can now move towards that settlement, as I want to be able to do as much damage as possible quickly. There are obviously a few settlements around the area, and we already know that we're at war with a lot of factions. Especially in harder difficulties, this might prove to be a problem if you're not being quick and taking out all the enemies as fast as you can. Okay, so a few things to talk about here. From experience, minor settlements with towers, it's not so easy for Khornate factions, as obviously you don't have any range until you get some skull cannons. Now, when it comes to a settlement being captured, you have the following options. You can occupy it, but it will cost you 2,500 skulls, which is fairly expensive early on. You can sack it, you can skulls for skull throne it, which will raise the settlement and give you 1,000 skulls, or you can blood for the blood god it. This will then raise the settlement and summon a blood host army, but we'll talk about those a bit later. Remember, with Skarbrand's faction, raising settlements is very beneficial to you as you'll regain some movement, and that means that you can keep on moving. You're more than able to settle with any settlements that you capture, however, it is advised to wait a little bit, as that way you can just build up your skulls. And by the way, using skulls is not the only way to get new settlements. So naturally I decided to raise it just to get blood for the blood god, which means 1,000 more skulls, and then looking around, there's a bunch of different enemies all around the area. I know that there's a Slaaneshi faction at the very bottom, and since my other current enemies are Warriors of Chaos factions, I'm not too bothered about them. I rather deal with the Slaaneshi as fast as possible. Plus, I am aware that there is a growth city there, as that is a port, so that does help out, especially when you're starting to build up a new faction. I want to get a little bit more movement, however, so Eternal War from Unholy Manifestations will summon an army, and they will attack me directly. This early on is going to be something so weak that I can easily just auto-resolve it and get my movement back. With that, I can start moving down again and get closer and closer to the actual Slaaneshi force. That means that in one turn we've already had 3 fights, and there is certain points later campaign where you can constantly keep fighting depending on your positioning. But in turn 1, finishing up in rank 4 isn't too bad, I'd say. After our first battle, we also got access to a Blood Reaper for free. Now the reason why I didn't choose him to join up with Skarbrand is because that would have slowed down Skarbrand's movement range, and I feel like I could just move him down later. Blood Reapers work in a certain way that they are melee characters, but they can also have certain augments known as a locus with them. This is accessible to them at rank 11, and it isn't too far away, because really you'll start leveling up quite quickly. They'll also have access to a Juggernaut mount or a Blood Throne. It really much depends on what you prefer more. If you want them to be more damage oriented, I'd say both of them work very, very well. Possibly the Blood Throne is better, but I have had some very good results when it comes to the Juggernaut mount too, so it could also focus around your playstyle. It would take 2 extra turns to get fully to the Slaaneshi force, but I'm already here and I'm starting to do some damage. They have not been able to recruit so quickly, so I've been able to come with a decent stack of a lot of Bloodletters. Obviously being able to recruit on the move is quite useful just by taking up the new stance. I will talk about the stances soon, but the main thing to note here, like I said earlier on, any minor settlements that have towers and so on, it might be a bit of a struggle quite early on for your Bloodletters, and even Skarbrand too. Though it is very satisfying watching Skarbrand do his work, especially as he thrashes about when he throws himself into the middle of a large unit. But with the Slaaneshi faction now gone, Skulls for the Skull Throne will work again. I need more skulls for the future, and yes, I could colonize this place, but how it works with Khorne is corruption could give you a chance to then recolonize it for free. Obviously, it would start off as a tier 0, you'd need to build it up from there, I'll show that later on in the video, but skulls at the moment are a precious resource, and I don't want to put it on a small minor settlement which might even get attacked by, say for example, the Demon Prince, or even Nakari, who's very close to me. Especially as I pan over throughout this map, there's loads of enemies surrounding me at the moment, and I rather not risk a minor settlement. So I've just got to prepare myself, get ready to go attack the Cold Mires, and take as much territory as I can. By that I mean just raising it down and hoping that it becomes part of mine anyway. It's now time to recruit another army, and obviously we only have one proper lord choice, which is the Herald of Corn. Yes, an Exalted Bloodthister is there, but you have to level up the Herald for that. And I don't know about the other creators, but I've been playing as Khorne like really hyper aggressively. So I figure around turn 3 is the best time to start recruiting an army and preparing it whilst I'm moving Skarbrand around. Now, you want one that's going to be quite beneficial for you, and I got quite lucky here with Bad Hat, as that increases Khorne corruption. We want as much Khorne corruption as possible to be able to have a better chance at getting the raised settlements to join us. This was confirmed to me by someone at Creative Assembly, that the more Khornate corruption there is, the better of a chance you have. The Herald of Corn and the Blood Reaper aren't that different. You see, the majority of their skills are very much the same, being able to have a Juggernaut or a Blood Throne mount, and even being able to pick from the same locus. This means that if you want to have a Herald with 2 different Blood Reapers in your army, you're able to get different types of locus. That being said, keep in mind that eventually you will lose these skills with the Herald if you choose to make them an Exalted Bloodthister, but I will say the Herald as it stands, despite having no magic like all the other Heralds, is still fairly strong and is able to hold out its own on the battlefield. Now, I did say that every now and then you can use skulls to colonize a settlement, and this is usually the best time when you try to take over a provincial capital, as obviously they already come with walls and so on. It becomes much more beneficial to you, and I've been doing that every area more or less. Any areas that I find that will be choke points for me, where I know enemies will come for me and so on, like for example here at Blackrock, as it's a provincial capital, and it borders an area where I know there are a few Nurgle factions, Slaaneshi factions and so on. I want to be prepared just in case they declare war on me, especially since, and this is more self-inflicted, I've been breaking non-aggression pacts and pretty much any other type of pact that I may have, purely because I'm Skarbrand, and if they want to declare war on me, why not? I want the fight. Early on into your campaign, obviously as you level, you'll also get the prompt for slaughter and carnage, Skarbrand's own unique weapons, and as you can tell from the stats, they're very, very powerful. The only problem is that it's not an easy fight, and even I struggled with it a few times when I was doing my testing. Don't go in there with bloodletter stacks because you're going to have a bad time. Like, really bad time. I did have a bad time. But you're going to want these weapons early on, as you can tell from the passive ability, which increases base weapon damage and armor-piercing weapon damage every time you kill a single entity, which means that if you're going to be dealing with hordes, or say the survival battles, this is going to make Skarbrand incredibly powerful, even more so if you can get him to max rank and just start ripping through everything that comes in front of you. Within that same turn, as I said earlier, there is a chance of those settlements that you've raised to join your faction. Weirdly enough, this is the first time I've had two join me at the exact same time, but hey, I'm not going to complain, especially since the first tier, the first rank, costs no growth. So it didn't really take that long. It did for one, as it took 9 turns, but hey, it's still something, and obviously my corruption was not too high at that point. The higher the corruption, the better, and I did forget to give Skarbrand the extra corruption skills because I don't know why. I just forgot. We also managed to get a free recruitment for a Cultist of Corn. Now, a lot of people were worried about the Cultist of Corn because obviously no magic, what's it gonna do, and so on. Turns out that the character itself is quite decent in stats, higher armor, good damage output and so on, it's also shielded, but then you get some cooler stuff too. You've got the generic skills which increase your armor, your melee defense and so on to make him even tankier, but you can also summon bloodletters, being able to upgrade that to be able to summon 3 different bloodletters, and upgrade it even further to summon a Bloodthirster. So you're going to be able to get some unit summons out of this character, meaning that the Cultist of Corn will have a lot more uses. Melee-wise, I've been using him frontline for my other campaign, and he seems to be able to hold out his own, even without the summons. This is where I make a big mistake, as I really wanted Slaughter and Carnage, so I decided, well, you know, I have an army of bloodletters, I should be fine. No, I was not. As you can see here, you're going to be fighting a decent amount of enemies. 2 armies of Corn, which totals to 2 Exalted Bloodthirsters and 1 Standard one, and then a army of Nurgle. And yeah, you do have your fights put out for you here. Hopefully I'll be able to show at least this cinematic in here before my frame rate dies again, because it seems to be the choppiness at the moment, but keep in mind that Creative Assembly are aware of that issue and they're checking it out.
The Spine Crusher, the Skull Taker, the Blood Quencher. I am violence. I am war. I am wrath. I am rage incarnate. I am Skarbrand, the Unforgiven.
So I'm not going to show off the full battle, as I am kind of limited to video timings at the moment, and I do have a very, very long video coming out later. But don't make the same mistake I did just because you got greedy, and yeah, bloodletters, no, they're just not going to work here. The fight itself wasn't too bad, it was difficult at the very least, and it was definitely interesting seeing 3 different Bloodthirsters pile on Skarbrand as he tried to fight them all off. Having a little bit of extra help with my other heroes did dramatically help, that's for sure. But in case you're wondering, this is how my armies ended up, with Skarbrand almost dying and losing my 2 Juggernaut units. Thankfully, I was able to recruit some more later on in the campaign, but yeah, it was not an easy fight. It was not an easy fight. Mind you, I did keep throwing Skarbrand in the front of everything because, I mean, it was just kind of funny. He can definitely hold his own, he's very good at fighting off multiple units, but I was using him to fight off single targets, and he did deal with, I believe, the 3 Bloodthirsters, the Soul Grinder of Corn, and finally the Exalted Great Unclean Ones, so that's a lot of kill counts on his name. We can take a quick look at the commandments section, as now I finally have a full province. It took 13 turns, but this was just naturally generated via the RNG, and I was kinda too cheap to spend skulls, I'll be very honest with you there. But leaving my cheapness aside, you can see that the benefits are quite good. There's also some which are rather interesting. For example, a few of them have melee attack plus 1% for all armies. armies. This means that you can keep getting more and more bonuses for all your forces and becoming a rather terrifying melee powerhouse. This should remove the worries from people who are kinda concerned, considering obviously yes, Khorne doesn't really have any range, but if you're doing a lot of melee damage, you can even it out too. Now, there is a Nurgle faction which, interestingly enough, we had a non-aggression pact with at the start, and you know what, they're kinda in my way, so I just want to get them out of the way, especially since I know that they are a direct route to Nekari. So, yeah, let's go kill off some Nurglings, which to our benefit very early on, they'll basically just have Nurglings in their garrison, which means that we can just destroy them, get more skulls, and progress that way. Two armies also works very well, because we can get as close as possible. Unfortunately, certain times I do not judge where my movement is, and Skarbrand had to stop, but in this case, it's okay. We've already destroyed one of their settlements, Skarbrand can deal with any other enemies that might show up, and we can just keep progressing. We can now check the stances, as there are a few. We've got the standard movement, we've got standard march, and obviously ambush and raiding, but we also have trials, which will allow you to set your own troops into... well, yeah, they're just going to start killing each other. It's the best way to explain it. But you'll be able to get some unit experience, some skulls, and weirdly enough, some winds of magic, which I've already asked CA what that means. I think it's just left there from something else. I mean, it has to be. And obviously there's a demonic summoning one, which you're able to stop and just summon, which I believe is also shared with all the different monogod factions, but I cannot confirm nor deny that just yet, and I need to actually check anyway. This is also another perfect example as to how I really need glasses. As I just destroyed the Cliff of Beasts, I moved up and then obviously at this point was quite off, and then I decided to summon in an extra manifestation army as that should get me closer. No, it did not. Just off. But hey, at least I got close enough to be able to do damage the next turn, and we know that that is the last settlement for this minor Nurgle faction. Only a few short turns later had I already started to deal with Nekari. He only had one main force that was fully up to stuff, and the others were pretty weak, so I figured now would be the best time more than ever, as if you remove a faction from the campaign map, you remove them from the whole narrative of the game. This doesn't mean that I don't have to get a Seneshi soul, but it means that I will have one less faction to contend with. It can work out quite well depending on who you're playing and how quick you are to take out other factions. It's very possible in theory to knock them all out quite quickly, but you're going to have to aim for them. Nekari was just the easiest one for Skarbrand because we're literally in the same area, we're both in the Northern Chaos Waste, and if you don't try to take him out early, then he's going to try and take you out, so I'd rather deal with him before having some Seneshi forces coming for me while Skarbrand is in the realms of chaos. This also means where Skarbrand starts will give you a lot of variety of different enemies. Yes, they will mostly be Chaos factions, but that means that you'll already be fighting Nurgle, you'll fight Sinesh, you'll fight Tzeentch, you'll fight Warriors of Chaos, so you won't be fighting the same thing over and over again, which was an issue for some factions in Warhammer 1 and Warhammer 2. Like, for example, in the Lustria Ball, if you were playing as a Skaven, or you would be fighting against his Lizardmen for a long time. And if you're curious about Nekari's own defeat trait, we've got it right here. Experience gain plus 7% for Lords and Heroes. Not too bad. Well, pretty good to be honest, especially early campaign if you're going to start doing a lot of damage with Skarbrand. This is something very valuable to know in the future. Positioning before declaring war on a faction, especially if you're wanting to jump from settlement to settlement, is very, very important. You can see here, I've gone to the other side here, then declaring war, then obviously auto-resolving, but then I can start moving further to the next settlement and be able to do some damage. Unfortunately for me, I could have gotten some extra items possibly and been able to do it a third time. I couldn't get the whole province done, but hey, 2 out of 3 ain't bad, and I got very, very close to their last settlement, meaning that I could get rid of this faction and not have to worry about them trying to backstab me. I now also have access to a Chaos Cult of Khorne, so I can show you their benefits. 3 of them will focus around generating skulls. That, as you can imagine, is quite useful because it's a main currency. The final one is the Blood Cult Arena, which will instantly transport your faction leader to this settlement, and then destroy the cult. Now, the reason why that's so good is, say for example, in a faction in Cathay has now got a Chaos Cult of Khorne there, you can then teleport Skarbrand that way and do some damage if you want to start raising some hell. This doesn't have to follow for the narrative, but it could be just after the narrative, or if you want to ignore the narrative altogether and want to just destroy Cathay, the Empire, Also, yes, everything that happens with regards to Demon Soul still happens to you as Skarbrand, so you'll still have to go to the Realm of Corn to get a Khornate Demon Soul. And for a little throwback to yesterday's video, look who's decided to follow me when I played as a different faction. I'm not sure if this is just Creative Assembly making it do that or something at this point, or the AI has it out for me or something, because Cairo seems to be very enamored with me, despite whatever I play. Now, in regards to Blood Host, as I haven't really shown that off yet, this is an army that you can control, costs upkeep, but you cannot replenish or recruit new units for. However, it will instantly spawn if you decide to use Blood for the Blood God, and depending on how much tech you've used and so on, they can get more and more powerful. As you can see with the one that I'm about to spawn, it's pretty strong. A few Bloodletters as expected, but also 3 different Bloodthirsters. We've got a unit of Fleshhounds of Corn, a unit of Chaos Furies of Corn, and of course 3 Skull Cannons. Very powerful stack, and how it functions here is that they need to be doing damage. If they don't do damage, they'll start to take attrition and eventually disappear. So you'll want to make them do as much damage as possible. They can get fairly expensive, so I'd suggest not doing this early on unless you absolutely have to. I'm only doing this now just to showcase it. And finally, I can show you the mechanic in regards to your Herald becoming an Exalted Greater Demon. All you really need to do is level up to turn 15. After that, it's an RNG status, so it might pop up the next turn, it might not. I got very lucky here, and you get 3 options from a dilemma. You can decide to turn it into an Exalted Bloodthirster if you so wish, continue as a Herald permanently, or wait for 10 turns. It's all up to you, as obviously the Bloodthirster will not have access to the Locus, and will obviously not have the mounts, though could you imagine a Bloodthirster having 2 Blood Thrones as roller skates or something? I mean, it can be kind of funny. Anyways, it's really up to your choice of playstyle and so on. Keep in mind that when you do, because I'm obviously showcasing as you pick, there's a little thing that happens where, yes, it will become rather powerful, but it will also lose levels. So my level 15 has now turned into a level 7, though stat-wise and so on, there's a drastic change. It becomes a very powerful melee character that can fly too. You can choose if you want it flying or landed or both. It's just a very different change. The power level is very obvious. I'd say that both Lord types have their benefits, though I must admit that the Exalted Bloodthister is kind of cool. But that's pretty much it in terms of Khorne. I wonder what you guys think. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, as I know a lot of people were kind of worried. Unfortunately, I'm not able to have the cinematic intro and the flyover. As I mentioned in the pinned comments to my videos yesterday, it's had some issues and it made the game footage really choppy, which I just want to avoid now. So when that gets fixed up by Creative Assembly, then we can start doing some analysis of all that and talking about that and so on. But with that, my friends, we've come to the end of our video. Thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy the video, might I suggest giving the video a like, or even subscribing to the channel, as it really does help us out. In the description section below are various links to different social media platforms such as Facebook, Instagram, and Discord. Also in the description section is an affiliate link with Element Games where you could buy loads of hobby-based products, not just Warhammer, for 10 to 25% off. Making a purchase using that link and also our special code, which is also in the description, supports the channel at no extra cost to you, which we think is rather cool. A big thank you to our patrons. Your support means the world to us. It's amazing that people want to help a small channel like us grow and get to a higher level of content. A big thank you to Gibraltar LUSC, Ryan Bertsche, Andrew Prince, and Okro for subscribing to us at our Fane level. You guys are super cool. And a big thank you to Edward Yule, VS Vasan, Aaron Whitman, and Shaggy for subscribing to us at our King level. Honestly, we can't thank you all enough. And lastly, a big thank you to all of you for liking, sharing, and commenting on these videos. Honestly, it's because of you guys that the channel has been growing at such a great pace lately, so we can't thank you all enough. But with that, my friends, thank you so much for watching once again, and we shall see you all again very, very soon. Have a good day.